I have an 11-year-old son, and he is currently in the 5th grade. He was one of those kids who grew up asking a lot of questions. I have an 11-year-old son, and he is currently in the 5th grade. He was one of those kids who grew up asking a lot of questions. Why is the sky blue? Why can't we breathe underwater? Why is a crescent moon called a crescent moon and not something else? So on and so on. A lot of questions. And over the past year or so, I've noticed that there had been a shift in the content of what he's asking me. He asked me questions like, what is consent? And what is a statute of limitation? And finally, what is sexual assault? Now, aside from the shock of having my child asking me these questions, is grappling with the weight of what he is actually asking. Like all of us, he's a product of his times, and like all of us, he's living in an era, in a moment in history, where these words are dominating the headlines. So, what happened in 2018? Well, undeniably, one of the most talked about topics in 2018 was women. 2018 really was seen by a lot of people as a watershed moment in the context of gender equality. But I see it actually more accurately described as a flashpoint. It was an accumulation of events and awareness building that had built up and ignited into a number of different movements. So in order to help us make sense of this, I wanted to take a look at some of the stories we've all been talking about this year. We've seen that powerful men cannot act with impunity. And to that, I would actually add powerful women as well. We've seen that victims are beginning to speak up and speak up in droves. And they're beginning to be believed, not just in the court of public opinion, but in the court of law. And we've also seen that world leaders are not exempt. They have to be kept accountable for their words and actions as well. We've seen the rise in personal stories, in the number of people, men and women, who share them, and in the fact that when they converge, they become something much bigger than themselves. We've also seen that there's tremendous power in unifying and having a number of voices come together as one voice. We've also seen that there's tremendous power in the bravery of one voice. So if these are the stories that we've all been talking about, let's gut check it against some facts in the world. The fact is, girls still lag behind boys when it comes to access to education. The fact is, women still get paid less than men for doing the same job. The fact is, women are still severely underrepresented in positions of decision-making. In fact, if you look across the spectrum of social issues, everything from migration to poverty to access to clean water, healthcare, etc., there is a theme that emerges, which is women and girls bear a disproportionate amount of the burden of human suffering. I want to pause here for a second and ask all of us a question. When you hear that, how do you react? Do you feel galvanized into action? Or do you feel overwhelmed and paralyzed? That's a question that I've been really fascinated with throughout my career. I've worked for more than 20 years in social advocacy. A lot of it has been in gender equality. I'm also a storyteller. I write and I make theater. And something that research has shown is that statistics and data inform people, but stories persuade them and change them. In fact, storytelling is one of the oldest forms of communication in the world. Some of the earliest civilizations told each other stories to teach each other survival skills, to preserve bits of their history and culture. And in general, it preserves and shapes the values of that society. And I would argue it's no different today. The things that are in the news, the movies that we watch, the music that we make, the books that we read, even social media, those things are actively shaping our culture and archiving them. One of the things that we have all been taught is to think globally and to act locally. So I try to apply that to the work that I do. So if I want to make a difference on the global scale of progress and gender equality, and I want to tell meaningful stories, what does that look like on the local level? Do I maybe look for people who are in my community in Singapore and try and tell their stories? So that's in fact what I did, and I want to share a couple of them with you today. This is Pashan. When Pashan was a student at Overseas Family School, he enrolled in Model UN. And one of the things that he learned about was the prevalence of violence against women and the amount of human trafficking that exists, especially in his home country of India. Pashan was appalled by this. And he thought, well, I have to do something. I'm going to go back to my school and I'm going to start awareness campaigns. I'm going to start a club. I'm going to start a UN Women Club. And he met some unexpected backlash from his own peers. People said things to him like, why are you the president of the UN Women Club, Pashan? Is there something you want to tell us? Are you transitioning? Do you secretly want to be a girl? Things that are discouraging. It didn't stop Pashan. In fact, he carried on with the UN Women Club. And furthermore, he realized not only can he apply his education to furthering the cause, he can also devote his vocation. So today, Pashan is a student at King's College reading law so that one day he can become a human rights lawyer. This is Sumita. When Sumita was a little girl, she had a father and an uncle who were aeronautical engineers. And they would tell her, whatever we can do, you can do. If we can build airplanes, so can you. So that's what she did. She graduated with a degree in aeronautical engineering, and she was the only woman in her class. But that's not all. She decided to enroll herself in national service because she wanted to serve her country and because she heard what her father and her uncle said. Anything we can do, you can do. During national service, several of the men would come up to her quite confused, say, you don't have to be here, right? We do, but you don't. Why are you here? And don't you think this will make you quite manly and nobody would want to marry you, etc.? That didn't matter. Sumita completed her national service. She was one of 20 women from her platoon to finish, and she earned the respect of her peers. And finally, in the middle, that's Neural. When Neural was growing up, she had never seen a single person who looked like her work in a single job that involved science or technology or math. But that's the stuff that she was good at, and that's what she was interested to study. So after she completed her degree in engineering, she decided to start something called the CODET project. The CODET project teaches STEM subjects and coding free of charge to girls in the Muslim Malay community. She wanted to make sure that the next generation of girls who look like her did not have this misconception that they were not able to do what she is doing now. What do these three people have in common? They chose not to be paralyzed. They made decisions to change their own trajectory in their lives, and those decisions rippled out into their communities and affected other people. If what is happening on a global level can bear down on us and affect the things that we talk about, the things we prioritize, the questions that we ask, then I would challenge you to consider that the reverse is also true. The things that we make a priority, the things that we say is important, the things that we choose to have conversations about, those things can ripple out into our communities and further out into the world. So the question remains, are you going to engage in 2019? When this year is over, how will we talk about it? And what will your part be? Thank you.